Hi everyone, Travis Ragsdale here alongside Chris Otts. We want to talk to you about some reporting that Chris did really over the past few months about Humana and its relationship with Louisville. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about the story itself, some of your findings in the story, and why you felt like this was a story that needed to be done.
Well, I think, everybody who's been downtown since the pandemic, has been receding, has kind of noticed that it's just a different place than it was before. And then also, I've been a reporter in this town for a long time on business and economic issues, and one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to is our headquarter companies. Because they are so important for Louisville's economy, right? I mean, there's just a ton of high-paying jobs that create wealth in this community from these companies, and obviously Humana is the top dog, the biggest, the most important company that we have. And I've been curious to watch how, as Humana becomes a bigger and bigger, they've grown very steadily. You wonder how that growth is going to conflict with keeping a company sort of rooted in what can be at best described a mid-sized city like ours, right? And then you introduce the work from home revolution, the work from anywhere revolution into this, and how has that changed things? I started to get the idea for this story several months ago. You always meet random Humana people in the community.
Because there's so many of them.
There are so many, right? I remember talking to one person who said, I oversee a team, and since the pandemic, I've hired like 5 people, none of whom who live here. And that would not have been the case before. So it got me thinking about this question of, how does, the work from anywhere reality that we're living in change, the economic benefits of having a big headquarters company like this. And then you hear other things like, are the top executives at the company as connected to Louisville as they used to be? And to be sure, they were not always so. It's always been kind of a mixed bag in terms of the people at in the C-suite at Humana and how many live here or live elsewhere. But one of the things I reported in the story is that before the pandemic, there was still like the expectation that you had a regular presence in Louisville, and that's not necessarily the case any longer, which is frustrating to some people who are based here. And to do well, the benefit of being in Louisville isn't as much as it used to be within the ranks of the organization. So couple that with, there's one more pillar to the story, which is that because Humana has gotten so efficient at working from home and working virtually, they have just massively downsized their presence in downtown Louisville. So, they have 2 kinds of spaces, the buildings they own and the buildings that they lease. The office space that they lease. And basically, they're getting out of the business of leasing office space. And that is really kind of a staggering amount of space that's coming back onto the downtown office market at a time when office vacancies are already through the roof. And it underscores that there are just like thousands of people who used to be coming downtown every day working for this company that are not any longer. And so what ramifications does that have for the sense of place downtown? So all of these were themes that I was trying to explore in the story.
And one of the things that I talked a lot with you about as you were reporting the story was the challenging parts of reporting this. Humana, like all big corporations, they keep an eye on everything that goes out. Everything has to stay on message. And this is not necessarily something that they would want publicly reported. So talk about what were some of your challenges in getting to the point where you felt comfortable publishing this story. for WDRB, it's pretty rare that we would publish a story that had direct anonymous quotes, but in this case we did. Why did we get to that point? How did we get to that point? I think that people might be interested to know that and the difficulties in reporting this kind of story.
Yeah. Well, the simple reason, Travis, is because there's no other way to get a story like this. I mean, you know, every big corporation, Humana is not unique in this. Employees are expected not to talk to the media without authorization of the company. And of course, the company's never going to give you the real story directly as to what's going on. So the only way to get it is to talk to people off the record, on background. So I had lots of coffee meetings with people, and all the ground rules for these conversations were really strict. And so that did make it a challenge, because as a reporter, you have to kind of assess the credibility of the people that you're dealing with, because they don't have any accountability for the information that they are giving you. You're the one who has the accountability for putting it out there. I will say I think we went to great lengths to verify the information that was in the article, including...
Yeah, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you sent literally, 10 to 15... 18 bullet points directly to Humana well before our published dates, and said,
this is what it's going to say.
This is what the story is going to say.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to me, because you're laying it all out there, and the response was, well, they didn't refute anything.
Right. But they also didn't confirm anything. I mean, they basically just chose not to engage in that process. So, do you interpret that as the company has no way to refute any of these items, or they're just not interested in getting into it? I mean, I think we put it out there to them and gave them the chance to say, this is wrong for these reasons.
Right.
And they didn't do that. Instead, they sent a fairly lengthy statement that was more general, just talking about, we're still committed to Louisville. We have a lot of local philanthropy, and acknowledging that their work environment has changed, like a lot of companies. And, just that. And also that, one thing we didn't talk about, that a big pillar of the story is the fact that a lot of top executives are now working out of a new office that they established in Washington, D.C. It's certainly much smaller than their presence in Louisville, but it's, if you read the architectural coverage of this, it's a very expensive office in a nice area of Rosslyn, Virginia, right across the river. And they, acknowledged that and said it makes sense for them to be there because their biggest customer is the federal government, but it doesn't diminish their presence in Louisville. So I think they got a sense, certainly, of where the story was going when I sent them that list of facts, and they were reacting, to the narrative, but without engaging in the particular items. And then I even followed up and said, hey, I should have directly asked you whether the CEO, Bruce Broussard, still even has a residence here, because that was one of the pillars of the story was, my reporting that he sold his Louisville residence in a way that was not transparent, like a normal real estate sale. It's just, we can talk about that. And then, I wanted to follow up directly and say, I really want to be clear, does he even have, and they said, we're just not going to comment at all on the personal residence of any of our employees. So, it was they really dealt with the story at an arm's length.
Yeah, it was very hands off. I think that it's important. This is an important story because Humana is so important to Louisville and the economy of Louisville.
Right.
At this point, somewhere more than 10,000 people in Louisville are employed by Humana. I don't know what, it's top 5, I think, as far as employers go in the city. But that's, with the backdrop of, for instance, Papa John's, another huge, important corporation, it was for Louisville, that has now moved a lot of its operations away. And it's an important thing that you're going to have to keep an eye on as we move forward here, I think.
Yeah. So that is one thing that I was sort of wondering and speculating about through the story is Humana sort of quietly going the same way as Papa John's and Yum Brands? These are two of our other biggest publicly traded companies where we've seen this headquarters leakage, basically, that with Yum Brands, it was to Dallas, where they also have, sort of a headquarters. Their top executives were, acknowledged 5-6 years ago that they all are based there now after David Novak, who was based here, stopped running the company. And then with Papa John's, of course, John Schnatter, the founder, lost control of the company. That's kind of an old story, but, the new people who came in, the new CEO lived in Atlanta and never wanted to move to Louisville, and then decided that, Atlanta is going to be the second headquarters or co-headquarters. So they still call themselves a Louisville company, but, a lot of the key jobs and key people are not here. That's obviously a regrettable trend for the city, and hopefully it's not happening with Humana, but I think there's some evidence that something similar may also be going on, and so that's one of the things that I was trying to explore with the story.
Well, it's a great story. It was great reporting, and I knew you spent many sleepless nights working on it. It's an important story, and one that I think that Louisville obviously should be paying attention to as we move forward here. You can find it online right now at WDRB.com. Thanks for joining us.